the State Capture Commission. He's been going there. There are also these pending court cases. He's been going there. So to have a person that has not been found guilty by any court of law, then we cannot find ourselves to say, but this person, our member cannot be a spokesperson of a foundation.
No, but Mr. Ramaphosa hasn't been found guilty by any court of law.
That is why we are pursuing this issue in Parliament, so that there is real accountability. Like, if I can stress this right now, currently, there is no one that can outright say Mr. Ramaphosa is guilty or is innocent on that Phala Phala farm scandal. So what we are pushing for is the ATM. It is for the public to actually know what transpired in Phala Phala, so that a determination can be made in Parliament whether he's guilty of something or is innocent of something. So the impeachment process that we've been advocating for, it is a process that would reach that determination whether he's committed a crime or he's not committed a crime. And his organization has been trying to block that particular inquiry from happening. You'll recall that in September, the DA proposed an ad hoc committee to investigate. The ruling party said no. There was an impeachment vote last week. Again, the ruling party said no, let us not have an inquiry. Therefore, we cannot, as a country, move on without having that certainty that the president has not been found of wrongdoing. Other people in the country, they must also face the full might of the law. They must also be held accountable. But what we must not do, we must not make wrongdoing a matter of perception. Wrongdoing must be a matter of there is an inquiry that is held, there is a court case, and there is a determination where a person can be said he's done wrong or he's innocent.
But I mean, on the balance of probabilities, right? I mean, you have a lot of issues that you could pick up on the former president, whom Mzwanele Manyi, protects, right now, and you cannot, sit there and say, I mean, Jacob Zuma is going through a process, and it's a court of law that will, determine whether or not he is guilty. But on the balance of probabilities, there's a prima facie case that, in fact, more than one instances or cases, the former president, didn't do himself, his political party, and this country proud. If you look at what emerged at the State Capture Commission inquiry, for example, there's a lot he has to answer for. So if you were the kind of political party, you portray yourselves to be a country that cares about this country, you should care about the fact that Mzwanele Manyi, the head of policy in your political party, is a spokesperson and a defender of such a man.
Look, like I explained earlier, the processes are there. He went to the State Capture Commission, and from there, even if you look at the recommendations, there are recommendations that the NPA must investigate further, etc. What we're saying as the ATM is that those processes, the former president must answer. He must answer for whatever that commission is saying. He might have done something wrong.
I mean, what is the message you're sending to South Africans if you have, your person being the defender of that kind of a person? We're not saying he's guilty, but we're saying, given, what is in the public domain about the former president, isn't that the last person you would want to be next to?
Again, like I said earlier on, let us remove perception from what corruption and wrongdoing must not be a matter of perception, because what's in the public domain is perception.
No, but then why is that the case? Why are we adopting that attitude towards Jacob Zuma and not adopting the same attitude towards Cyril Ramaphosa.
With Mr. Ramaphosa, what we're saying is that what's in the public domain has not been tested via Parliament through the processes. Let us have an inquiry that will determine the wrongdoing, and let us not leave it to perception. Similarly, with the former president, let all of these other institutions that are investigating him investigate. Let the court processes continue, and let there be a proper determination. It's the same principle. Let the law take its course with the former president, and let us Parliament do what is required of us as members of Parliament to actually reach also a determination with the current president. It's the same principle.
I mean, you realize, I mean, that's the reason many people believe you're a proxy party. I mean, you are set up to basically deal with ANC internal matters. You know, that you are not the independent political party that you would like South Africans to believe. You were formed specifically to actually, by a faction within the ANC that seeks to pursue their own agendas, and your existence has nothing to do with what you continue to tell South Africans you're about.
That is the biggest lie. If you check now what we're saying with the former president, we're not saying the former president must not be held accountable. We're saying there are processes that are in place. Lord, let those processes continue, and let there be a determination. Similarly, we're saying that the ruling party, when it comes to the current president, is blocking any form of an inquiry or investigation that will yield a result of determining whether the current president is guilty or not. So what we're saying, let the processes continue. And we do want to state we've got nothing to do with the ruling party. Our focus is on the executive. Our focus is on improving the lives of South Africans. And in Parliament, we are doing what we're elected to do, which is to hold the executive accountable. In the previous terms, there were parties that were very vocal in holding those particular president accountable. No one had an issue with them. Similarly, there are parties even here now in the current Parliament that are also holding the current president accountable. No one is coming and saying they are proxies. We are not proxies. We are an organization that was formed by the people of our country with the sole intention of improving the lives of the people of our country. And I want to repeat, we've got no association whatsoever with any member of the ANC.
Who funds your party?
It is the members of the churches that support us. That is why you find that we do not, even when you check the IEC records, there's not, millions and millions that we get, because we don't even have funders that reach that threshold when it comes to funding, because it is, few rents that we get from the individual members from the different churches.
But what though is your, remind us, what is your party about?
The party is formed to transform our country. Firstly, to ensure that there's a new type of leadership that we are going to have in our country, leadership that is ethical, servant leadership that is focused on the interests of the people. There must be transformation when it comes to the economy so that South Africans can participate in the economy. We need to deal with these oligopolies that are dominating the economy, because those oligopolies are actually stifling the economic growth, and they are keeping out many participants, particularly the African majority in the economy. We also believe that in order to achieve everything in our country, you need to deal with parties that are funded. And when they are funded by these multitudes of organizations, they serve at the behest of those organizations, because whoever funds you controls you. Now, if you are going to have a party that is funded by ordinary citizens, now that party will be accountable to those citizens. That is why, as we sit here now, there's no one millionaire or backer that can call me and say, I don't like how you presented a debate in Parliament, change that, remove this motion, put this motion, because there is no individual that has got that hold over us as a party. We as a party, we are accountable to our members who sustain our existence.
Who are these oligopolies you're talking about?
If you were to check all of the industries in our country, if you check the banking industry, there's 5 to 7 banks that are dominating that particular space. You go to the financial services, it is also the same. You go to telecommunications, it is also the same. So, and all of these companies in all of these industries, they have a dominant market share of over 90% of the market share in their respective industries. So we believe that the manner in which that part of the economy is set up is not firstly inclusive, because we've got 7 or plus minus 7 companies that are controlling more than 90% of the total market share. For example, if you're to look at the telecommunications industry, it will be your Vodacom, your Cell C, your MTN, your Telcom. They're dominating more than 90% of the market share. Whereas if there were more players in the economy, firstly, there would be more jobs that are created and there will be more value that is added to the citizens. So that is why we believe that in order for South Africa economically to thrive, particularly for the citizens to be active, we need to dismantle oligopolies and have industries to be not to be dominated by a selected 7 or so companies.
I mean, but you also need to build local industries that can be big players in their own right, I mean, in the country, but also, I mean, in the world. You want market leaders. I mean, people who are going to go out there and show that South Africa has what it takes or can be a leader in very specific industries, especially those that are taking the world forward, of which telecommunications is one.
Yeah, that is not an issue. The issue is, in our view, the structure of the economy, whereby you have few players that are dominating. Now, that is why we also advocate in Parliament that let the government change its spending patterns, because currently government spends more than 80% of its budget on big businesses, and it is completely sidelining SMMEs who could benefit from the government spending, and they would get companies that would actually grow and participate in the economy. So that is why we believe that that needs to change, and when it changes, we are going to have more participants in the economy. And secondly, yes, you are going to have those world leaders, but those world leaders must not come at the expense of the exclusion of SMMEs or the majority in our economy.
Reflect a little on, I mean, this year, what, I mean, outside of the Cyril Ramaphosa issues that you sort of became famous for lack of a better description. What for you were the issues this particular year?
Firstly, this year has been, we can't celebrate anything that happened this year. If you're to look at all of the indicators, whether it's the unemployment rates, the poverty rates, the crime rates, the state of the economy, there's nothing for South Africans to celebrate. There's nothing that is memorable that, we can say South Africa had a successful year. So hence you find that we have been, and we are still continuing to push for measures to make sure that there are more people that are active in the economy to reduce the unemployment rates. We need to deal with crime. You need to deal with the SOEs that are dysfunctional. And you need to deal primarily with the state that is becoming dysfunctional, because if you look at the attitude of the current executive, this executive is taking power away from the state to the private sector. Hence you find that the president will appoint people in the business sector to actually deal with the red tape concerning the small businesses, instead of boosting state capacity in that regard. So,
but what's wrong there with that? I mean, if you have people who have skills, who are sitting with capacity that they may not even be utilizing, because some of them, I mean, are people who are retired or who have run very successful companies, I mean, in the country. What's wrong with utilizing or bringing on board their skills and expertise.
You need to boost state capacity.
Yes,
yeah, I mean everything that you do.
You're going to do that because you have these people, you bring them on board, but you also bring senior public service officials who are going to be, whether they are mentored or they sit in the same room with these successful former executives who will learn a thing or two and hopefully transfer. You get skills transfer in the process. That can't be wrong. Countries around the world do that.
Yeah, that is not an issue. The issue that we are facing, it is the destruction of state capacity by moving some of the functions from the state to the private sector, whereas it should be the state that is having the capacity being boosted by whoever that is a citizen that can contribute. That is our major issue, that the state capacity is being deliberately undermined at the benefit of the private sector that is entering the fray. So that is what we are saying, that at the core of the root causes of the problems, it is the attitude of the government that is not pro-building of state capacity, but rather taking some of the functions of the state to the private sector. You've seen how much SOEs have been being dysfunctional. Look at the issue of Transnet, the issue of PRASA, you look at the issue of SAA, you look at the issue of the unbundling of ESCOM. But if you look at what is happening, it's in its entirety, state capacity is being reduced at the favor of the private sector.
But how is that? Over the years, we've had this. I remember once upon a time there was something called Project Consolidate, where engineers, accountants, people with very specific skills that are still, in short supply in the private sector, by the way, were brought, in to really help. In the case of Project Consolidate, it was local government, and it was lauded. In fact, people who analyzed what happened during those years discovered that the state was actually very antagonistic in the way it approached those, in fact, it received those people, and it made it difficult for them to actually do, what they were there to do. As a result, we as taxpayers were robbed, of the opportunity to actually have people who could help that particular space. As a result, 28 years or so into democracy, that space is still very problematic. You've seen how Auditor General report after Auditor General report has exposed, the problems of that space, which many people said had started being attended to. In other words, the problems of that space had started being attended to by such a project as Consolidate. But because it was never given a chance, it became a failure.
In our view, Budvuyo, you need to build state capacity in order to deal with the problems that are faced in the country. Yes, the state will have issues. There's no state that does not have issues. But you also, as a state, need to have mechanisms to deal with the problems that will encounter as a state in, advancing your objectives. There will be cases, for example, the issue of the Auditor General. There must be interventions that are done by Parliament, by the executive, to say, all of these years, we are getting all of these Auditor General reports that highlight all of these problems. What must be done to ensure that when the Auditor General picks up these issues, there is, there's action, tangible action that is taken against the wrongdoers. Not a case whereby the attitude of the government is to say, we've got all of these problems, and we are not going to boost or build the state to be able to deal with its own problems. Rather, we are going to go to the private sector and, delegate our responsibilities as a state to the private sector. In our view, the state is the only legitimate body or institution that can deal with these problems, because the state is a servant of the people. It exists to serve the interests of the people. The private sector, their interest, it is profit. It is something that will make economic value to them. Hence, with the myriad of problems that you face from your unemployment, inequality and poverty, etc., you need the state to be at the forefront of providing solutions to those problems, and you need the state to have mechanisms as well to deal with its own functioning, to be able to sift out any wrongdoing or any weaknesses its system is having towards achieving its objectives.
But you need those other players. I mean, you need business. You know, you need conversations with business, but you also need commitments, actual, very real commitments from them. In other words, to invest in the economy. You need the cooperation of your labor movement. You know, for example, in the interests of the country. So you cannot adopt an attitude that says they are there to make money or maximize profits, and therefore let's keep them at bay.
Look, the intention of the private sector will always to, profit. That is the bottom line. That is why you find that even with the minimum wage discussions, look at what happened in Marikana. Business there killed people because it was looking at their bottom line. So that is the nature of capital. That is the nature of private interest. That is why you need the state not to be antagonistic towards business or labor or any of these other stakeholders. However, you need the state to take the lead, and you need, as a state, to have an upper hand over the business, because the business must operate within your laws as a state, and you need, as a state, to have laws that will be effected or implemented by everyone.
Yeah, that's a fundamental issue, isn't it? Everyone should play according to the rules, but you cannot alienate them or keep them at bay because you are arguing that they're there to maximize profits. And where their actions lead to, the death of people or exploitation even, that's what you have to deal with.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that you don't bring them closer, and make sure that they act in the interests of the country.
No, the only issue from our side is have the state work together with all stakeholders, not to be antagonistic or to be against with any stakeholder. However, as a state, do not take your responsibilities and delegate them to the private sector, because the private sector does not have the same interest as the state. The state must have the interest of improving the lives of the people, getting rid of inequality, poverty, etc. The private sector, on the other hand, will not have the same interest as the state.
What can you expect from the ATM in the new year?
In the new year, we'll champion our cause of accountability. We'll also be very, very vigorous in terms of putting our suggestions and proposals as to what should happen in order to deal with crime, to deal with unemployment, to deal with all of the problems that we face in our country.
Okay. Mr. Zuma, best of luck.
Thank you so much.
In the new year, and thank you very much for talking to us today. Of course, up next, I speak to a leader of another political party who has sacrificed everything to try and rebuild a not so successful political party. Well, certainly from their track record over the years. That's what's coming up in a moment. Don't go away. Welcome back. Nelvis Kagema has quit his job to go and rebuild a political party that many South Africans may have forgotten. The Azanian People's Organization hasn't done well over the years, and a couple of elections ago, losing its sole seat in the National Assembly. What does he know that many of us do not know? He joins me on the line. Nelvis Kagema, good evening. Thanks very much for your time.
Good evening, Vuyo. Thank you.
Well. A bold move on your part, quitting a lucrative, by many people's standards, job, and deciding to go full-time and rebuild the Azanian People's Organization.
That's correct. That's correct. And I'm happy with my soul. I'm happy. That's what I want to do. That's the sacrifice I would want to, contribute to the struggle and to the people of this country.
Let's start with the basics. How are you going to feed your family?
Well, it's a matter that I discussed with my family getting into it, and I have really reached the twilight of my life. I'm beyond the hill now. I'm no longer into fashion. I'm no longer into big cars or whatever. And the only thing that matters for me is the education of my children. I've discussed that with my family. It does mean that there is a need for belt tightening. Remember, if we're talking about belt tightening, that is because we are privileged, because there are people who lost their lives. They can't do any belt tightening right now. I'm talking about Steve Biko, Unkoputse Tiro, Krisani, Solomon Mashango.
You were a public servant, just to put things, into perspective, and you were certainly not among the lowest paid public servants, if I may add that. And to quit something that many people would die actually to have is quite incredible.
That is correct. There is no doubt that I was living relatively comfortable, but I had to decide, because the problem is that my organization, Azapo, is punching below its weight, and the reason for that mainly is the fact that many of its leaders, are half. They're not full-time in Azapo, they are working elsewhere. It does mean that their time, is used by their employers, and then they come, the quarter of the time that is left, they give it to Azapo. So we had to turn this around, and I said to myself, look, let me come and do this and see if I cannot make sure that the footprint of Steve Biko is in the politics of this country, is into the heart of democracy, because Azapo is the institutional embodiment, of the soul of Steve Biko, making sure that Steve Biko is mainstreamed into the politics of this country. That can only happen if we are able to make a sacrifice that is far, far, far below the one Steve Biko took, which is to pay with his lives.
Let's go back then to 28 years. 28 years ago, Azapo decided not to participate in the first democratic elections. In your discussions as a party, did you discuss what that did to your fortunes or misfortunes?
Yes, we did. Yes, we did. We were aware that, tactically and strategically, our decision to boycott the 1994 elections injured the organization quite a bit. And because I think by 1991, if I'm correct, there was a Makino poll which suggested that Azapo could poll quite high, if elections were to be taken in that year. But we decided that we should look into matters of principle. And then we said in the 1994 elections, there was no land in those elections, and there was no dignity and humanity of black people in those elections, and there was no wealth and land of our people in those elections. And we thought we were forced to co-manage the fact that black people will continue to be poor, will continue to be sleeping in the streets, their children smoking nyaupe, education-less, wealth-less, landless, dignity-less, and everything that you can think of. And so therefore we said Azapo could not be, as a matter of principle, be part of those elections. We could not co-manage, the spitting on the graves of Krisani, Steve Biko, Onkoputse, Tiro, Solomon Mahlangu.
I mean, well, 5 years later, you, of course, changed your minds and decided to contest elections, but you didn't do well at all. You ended up with one member of parliament.
That is correct, and the reasons are not difficult to find, because Azapo is an organization that actually, scratches the foundation of capitalism, the foundations of racism, and then the foundation, of colonialism, settler colonialism, if you like, including neo-colonialism. And so therefore, an organization that is like Azapo, that wants to change the foundations of the systems of this country, is not likely to do well in terms of funding when it comes to the pockets of those who are wielding, the wealth of this country. And that is why, even if you look around now, you will see all the organizations that are in parliament. Just check, where do they get their funding? From the Oppenheimers, you can name them. And in fact, most of them are getting from their funding from the same people, and the people who want to make sure that they continue, to keep the pests of this country in white monopoly capital. And that is why you saw at some stage some of these organizations were forced that a DA and Ahang should come together because their funding were the same. Look at other organizations now, their funding are the same. So therefore, as Azapo, we have accepted our fate that we will not get our funding from the people we want to remove from the system. So therefore, we've got to rely on ourselves, crowdfunding and every way in which we can make money available to us, but we will not get it from those whom we want to remove.
Well, interesting you say that, because the person I was speaking to earlier, the leader of the ATM, well, he says they're not being funded by the big funders you are talking about. They are being funded by their membership, which comes in the main from the churches. While you have exited or lost the one member of parliament you once had, they have two members of parliament or two MPs in the National Assembly. So which then means that your theory may not be correct.
Well, ATM is faith-based, whereas our organization Azapo, there is a bit of rationality-based, and so therefore there are a lot more things that we need to do that are tangible in terms of convincing them, and that includes, boosting their morale, in them being able to see that indeed their organization is worth something in terms of changing the foundations of our oppression. Or anything that causes our oppression. So therefore, this is exactly what we are doing. We've started boosting the morale of our membership. We've started, building the systems of the organization. We've started even talking to black business and then explaining to them that, look, it doesn't matter. You may be having a few billions in your bank, your private bank, but if you cannot sacrifice at least $1 million to be able to ensure that you don't only receive crumbs as black business from the table of white monopoly capital, because this whole cake, this whole loaf belongs to you as black business. It belongs to the black people of this country. And so we've got to be better than we are. We cannot be, an upward of 33 million people of this country, of which you're talking about black people being poor. You're talking about quite a lot. actually, it's close to 50% of employment now, and I'm talking about the comprehensive, figure thereof, being unemployed. And you're talking about black people. You're talking about black people still, fetching their water from the river. You're talking about black people. Black business ought to be able to have institutions they can use, political institutions, and Azapo is available to be at their disposal, and then larger black people as a whole.
But of course, you also, as leaders of, that organization, take responsibility for some of the things that you have done in the past, where instead of consolidating, you had your own share of divisions and conflicts. You've had people like Libon Mabasa leaving Azapo to form SOPA. You've had the late Ngosi Molala to go and leaving Azapo to form the Black People's Convention. So you too have had your own, share of problems, conflicts, and you further balkanized whatever, the little that you had.
Well, there was nothing untoward about that reality, because remember, we were approaching a transition in the country in terms of change. We're at the crossroads as the people in the struggle and organizations themselves. So it went without saying, therefore, that there would be debate, critical debate, vicious debate, rigorous debate in the organizations, including Azapo, about how did we handle that change. And so there was that agreement and disagreement, divergence and convergence of ideas. And so it was that you found that those who could not agree thought it would be better for them to go the other way, which was their democratic right for them to do so. But Azapo remained on the path of where it thought it was right to be. And then as we are talking now, rebuilding Azapo and making Azapo an action-oriented organization and ensuring that Azapo is actually championing the struggles of the people in the communities, we are beginning to find ourselves, because Azapo has stood the test of time. And even those who thought that we have lost it, we are now beginning to find ourselves, and we are talking. But we're not going to make noise and come to the media and then do some showboating. We're not going to do that. We're going to talk, and talk with dignity and silently. And then if we find ourselves, we will find ourselves. But Azapo is here to stay, and Azapo is going to be here because we're the institutional embodiment of Steve Biko. We are the footprint of Steve Biko. We are the footprint of his soul, his political soul. And then we are ensuring that as Azapo, Steve Biko lives forever.
But what happened in 2022? What happened in the past year, that which presumably gave you the confidence to quit your job and decide to go and run Azapo on a full-time basis?
Well, it's because I'm dreaming. I'm a dreamer, but I'm a dreamer whilst I'm standing up.
Well, I thought only Vuyos were dreamers.
I'm dreaming whilst walking. I'm dreaming whilst marching as a soldier. I believe that it's going to happen. I have hope that it's going to happen. And I put all my efforts and my resources and my sweat into the belief that victory is set and it's going to happen. That's where we are. And one major change that has happened is that the organization agreed that there should be a transition in terms of leadership, which is why you saw that on the 4th of December 2021 at the Congress of Azapo, a new breed of leadership, a fresh, leadership with fresh and new ideas, more adventurous, have been elected. And I'm at the helm of that leadership. And then we were saying, you know what, we were Azasim in the past, we were Azasco in the past, we know how elections work, even before Azapo got into it, because as students, we were engaging in elections, and then we know how elections work at the university level. We are going to take the microcosm of that and build on that and take that adventurism government going forward. And having looked, and just this year, look at the milestones. Azapo has been on the streets, and then we've been chasing racists. Belinda Magoo is in trouble, and then was behind bars because of Azapo. She has run away from her residence because of Azapo, and there are many other milestones which indicate that Azapo is here to stay. The new thing that we've done is that we are saying Azapo is not going to be able to do this alone, and no one organization will. So therefore, we've got to bring together a like-minded organization in a united front, and Azapo is busy with that. You saw us, we started with the PAC, we've been working together, and then you saw us when we were remembering Steve Biko in September at the Steve Biko pilgrimage in Ginsberg. We invited UDM, EFF, and all the other organizations because we believe it is high time we stopped bickering amongst ourselves. We stopped competing amongst ourselves, because that is destructive competition. We'll need to work together. We need to find one another as like-minded organization, and we believe that's the way to go. And Azapo is exactly there at right now.
But what do you have to show for that relationship with the PAC, for example? I mean, it's been a good PR exercise, but beyond that, none of us has actually seen or observed any tangible, gains or results out of that relationship.
Well, that is a relationship that we believe is making wonders. First, also in helping to consolidate the PAC itself from within, because this kind of reference is even making members of the PAC who would be busy with other things, that are distracting, to be able to say, probably we can forget the smaller things. Why don't we look at this possibility that has opened up, this aperture that has opened up? And then the same thing with Azapo, and this is exactly what is happening. Immediately when we did this, we saw the change at the graph of our morale going up, and we also looked at how the public responded. The public responded positively, because remember also, this has been a mandate of the public, of the people for some time. And so as Azapo and PAC were responding to that mandate, because the people were questioning and starting to questioning what would be the difference between Sobukwe and PAC, Sobukwe and Biko, and Azapo and PAC, that would make them not work together. And then we've started doing that. And we've also seen that in various communities, people joining Azapo. We've seen also in various business circles, people opening up their passes into Azapo. And then we're also seeing, even you guys in the media are beginning to notice something is happening. It may be that at this point in time, we're still at the threshold of things, and we still have not managed to change things qualitatively, but there is a quantitative growth that is discernible inside Azapo, and we're very happy about it.
We're going to have an election as a country in the next 18 months or so. So the next year is going to be crucial for all political players. What can we expect from Azapo?
Well, definitely what we have said, and then that's what we have said ourselves as Azapo, is that a complaining and then whinging is not going to help Azapo, and then we're not going to change the rules to be able to suit Azapo. And then we've said as Azapo, we are going to play the game the way we find it. And then we're going to move in there, into this electoral democracy and play within the rules that we find. And then we're going to make it happen as Azapo. And then we've got to find the money. That's what we're busy with right now. And then we've got people, we have committees working along those lines, just separate and working on that. How do we find the money? What is our funding model that is going to be workable? Those things are there. Those systems are there. And we're also saying, come 2024, Azapo will not rule out, working with like-minded organizations if we think, that will be in favor of changing of our political fortunes. But that is a bridge we have not reached. It's a matter that we still have to see. But for now, Azapo is building its muscle. Azapo is building its capacity. Like I said before, some of you may not be able to see it because as a bodybuilder, you don't go there and lift your weights and then the next minute as you see something. But the way that the body builder can feel the pain, and without pain there will be no gain, and we believe we're on the right track and we're going whole out. And it is for that reason I decided I'm going to sacrifice my little peanuts. I'm going to go for the land where the peanuts grow.
Now, Kagama, best of luck to you, and thank you very much for talking to us.
Thank you, Vio.
He took that decision this year to quit his job and focus on rebuilding the Azanian People's Organization. That's our show for tonight. Thank you very much for watching. Have a good night.